The church may be in trouble, and it has nothing to do with COVID or the pandemic or face masks or online church or anything else that has happened over the last 14 months or so. I just read a report this morning that shows research indicating that 83% of churches in America are either in trouble or on the verge of being in trouble. And that's an alarming amount to me. As I read that, that was very alarming to me to think about that 83% of churches within the United States may be in trouble, or at least on the verge of being in trouble. And most of them don't know it. So the question is your church in that 83%? Is your church in trouble? Or is your church on the verge of being in trouble and you don't even know it? That's what we're going to talk about in this episode. So let's get started. So the big question is this: how do pastors like us who remain focused on the mission of Jesus and serving our communities without being distracted by everything in the world around us, how do we increase our effectiveness while living a lifestyle that doesn't compromise our health, our families, or our personal relationships with Jesus? That's the question this podcast is going to answer. I'm Dr. Brandon Party Cooper, and welcome to the Ministry Hackers Podcast. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Ministry Hackers Podcast. I hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a wonderful day. It is still cold and rainy here in Iowa, and so enjoying those showers that we should have gotten in April so that we can enjoy our spring Mayflowers. Well, unfortunately, it's all just rain, and hopefully the flowers will show up in the next couple weeks and the rain will go away and summer can get started. I know my kids are ready to go swimming, ready to enjoy the warm air outside. And so hopefully wherever you are, you're enjoying more of a spring, almost summer weather than we are here on the Mississippi River. I just want to remind you that we are giving away a free framework and one pager I talked about yesterday, talked about it a little bit last week, for those of you who are wanting to increase your engagement within your discipleship program. So for some of you, you don't have discipleship, you're coming out of COVID, you're coming out of shutdown and pandemic and all of that, and you're rethinking how you do discipleship, or you don't have a discipleship setup and you're trying to figure out how to get that started. Well, what I want to do is I want to give you this free framework and one pager that's going to walk you step by step right through how to create a discipleship experience that is engaging, that is geared towards spiritual growth and development and maturing the people within your church. It's very simple. It's very easy. You just go to ministryhackers.com/discipleship and put your name, put your email in there, and you will get everything you need. You'll get the framework, the step-by-step framework that shows you exactly how to do it. And with that, you'll also get a one-pager. Now, what the one-pager is it is a series of questions, and it's an online worksheet that you can use. It's almost like I'm sitting there with you asking specific questions as you go through the framework. And what it'll do is it'll take all the guesswork out. All you have to do is follow the questions, answer them right there on the one pager, and it will show you exactly how to create this engaging discipleship experience that not only takes people deeper in their spiritual walk with Jesus, helps them to grow and mature in their spiritual journey, but also is engaging and gets them drawn in, gets them built in, and in a lot of ways will create an atmosphere where being in that discipleship program or experience is the thing to do. And I have seen people who have implemented this and used this framework. I have seen individuals in their churches go back over and over again, not because they don't remember, not because they miss so many times, but they come back over and over again because it's so engaging, it's so fun. They learn so much, and there's so much in it that they want to come back and get more. And so, again, go to ministryhackers.com/discipleship. You can get the framework, the one pager, build that discipleship experience that you've always wanted, that engages people and grows them in a deeper walk with Jesus. So ministryhackers.com/discipleship. Get it today. You can start working on it today, and you'll be well on your way to creating that discipleship experience ready for the summer so you can engage your people as the summer rolls out. Okay. So as I mentioned in the opener, this morning I was reading a research piece from Tony Morgan and the Unstuck Group. Now, what they do is they do lots of research. They have lots of great resources, and it's actually one of my go-to places to understand what's happening in the church world and in ministry and among pastors. And so I was reading through the research, and there's all kinds of things in the report that I was reading. But one of the questions that was asked is, are churches growing or declining? Now, this research was done. Um, it came out during the pandemic, but it was done over the 12 months leading into the pandemic. So I can't remember exactly. I think it went through maybe April of last year. So a lot of the research was collected before the pandemic came in. And so most of what we're finding, or what the research pointed to, is the state of the church pre-pandemic. And so obviously we have to take into account what's happened over the last 14 months and how that's impacted. But I think what was alarming to me and what was concerning in a lot of ways for me was realizing that this is pre-pandemic reality. And so the question that was asked is, are churches growing or declining? And there were a series of questions, but essentially they were all pointing to this one question: are churches in America growing or declining? Now, the way that Tony Morgan and the Unstuck group, the way they use a basic bell curve, and they've kind of added their own. I've seen various versions to this, and they've added their own uh, markers to it to determine where churches lie. So if you're familiar with the bell curve, on the far left side is kind of the front end of whatever the experience is. So if you think of like iPhones, when iPhones first came out, on the far left side, you have your early adopters, the people that are, they're jumping on board before everybody else. They're, diving in, they're testing it out. They're your beta users, all of that, all the way to the right side. Those of us who almost 20 years later are just now thinking about, maybe we should try this iPhone thing. Maybe there's something to it. Those are on the far right side. Those are your late adopters, and those people who want to make sure that it's all the bugs are out before they buy it. So that's how a basic bell curve works. So in this scenario, so what Tony Morgan uses, on the far left side is the launch. So churches that are launching. So church plants, revitalizations, whatever, launches. It goes up to the top of the bell curve, and there's a couple steps in between, but the top of the bell curve is sustained health. So churches that are healthy, strong, vibrant, growing, sustaining their overall health. And then on the far right-hand side of the bell curve, so all the way at the bottom, are those churches who are on life support. Those churches who really have kind of crossed the threshold of there's really not going to be any growth without some major shift, some major reinvention of themselves. Most of the time, the churches that are in life support or on that side, it's really just a matter of time before they close their doors. Or in this age of revitalizations or larger churches coming in and enveloping older churches, smaller churches, the churches that are in that life support category on the far right-hand side of the bell curve, those are the churches that are most likely going to either close their doors, be absorbed, become a revitalization, something. But there's really no hope in their current trajectory of any growth whatsoever. So that's kind of the far left is launch, far right is life support. Now, and then top is sustained health. So what was concerning as I was reading the research and I was looking at it is that, you have your top or your left-hand side upward mobility, upward trajectory. And on the right-hand side, after sustained growth, you have this downward slope all the way to life support. And what was concerning is that 83% of churches in America that did this, and so I think it was close to 400 churches that filled out the survey, 83% of them were on that right-hand side of decline. So the three categories on that side are, as we talked about, you have life support on the far left. Right before that, you come to preservation, churches that are just preserving what they have. They're not necessarily dying, but they're on their way to death. They're on their way to, becoming to becoming on life support. And then the step before that is maintenance. And those are churches that, again, church is not growing, church is not innovating, church is not doing anything really new, but their overall congregation is remaining the same, numbers remain the same, giving remains the same. And everything they do is kind of focused on or geared towards just keeping the church going. So that's the maintenance phase. And so So the percentages on that side. So we'll talk about the left side real quick. So the left side is launch, momentum growth, strategic growth, and then as I said, the top is sustained health. In the launch phase or in the launch category, we have 6% of churches. In the momentum growth was 4% of churches, and then in strategic growth there were 5% of churches. In the sustained health category was 2%. 2% of churches would be categorized according to this survey and the data that was collected. 2% of churches would be considered in a healthy state, sustaining their health. So then that puts everybody else, the other 83% of churches, on that right side. You have 14% in life support, 7% in preservation, and 62% of churches are in the maintenance phase of their life cycle. 62%. That's an incredible number to me. But then when I step back and I start looking at, okay, the advancement of the church, so our influence in society, our ability to create change, our ability to draw in people in our communities at a large scale, our ability to, I don't really like the word relevant because that implies that we're somehow compromising our biblical values, but relevant in the sense of, we're in touch with the culture that's around us. We understand what's going on. We're able to engage it. We're able to create change within it. Too many of us are not in that. And so 62% of churches are in maintenance phase, which means that, we're essentially just waiting to enter into preservation and fall then into life support. Now, a lot of times this takes years and even decades in some instances. I've seen churches that are 15 people. Those 15 people started going to church 50 years ago and have remained faithful to the church all up until that point. And now they're the only 15 people left. And really the only thing keeping the doors of that church open are those 15 people who don't want to go anywhere else, but who really, that church really is not geared towards drawing in new people. And so that church will, for the next decade probably, they will exist as those 15 people until those 15 people pass away or move away. And so that church is on life support and will remain on life support for however long it takes for those people to either leave or to pass away. Which is it's a very morbid way of looking at church. But if we're all honest, for all of us, we're all pastors, we're all ministry leaders, like we get it. We've seen that. We've experienced it. Some of us have pastored in those churches where we try to make change or we try to create change, and it just isn't happening. The people in our church, in those churches, they don't really care about change. They believe in reaching the community. They believe in discipleship. They believe in those things, but they're really not going to do whatever it takes to get there. And my concern is that, again, 83% are on that downward slope. 62% of churches are in the maintenance phase, which means that overall, if we're looking at the American church across the board, making an impact in our country, in the lives of our communities and the people that we engage with, if we are in a maintenance phase, that means that we are not doing anything that's innovative. We are really not doing anything that's stepping out of our comfort zone. We're not really doing anything that's trying to understand the culture we're in, that's trying to figure out what we need to do to bring them into the church, to engage them, to put them in discipleship experiences. We're not really doing anything. We're just maintaining what we already have, which means most of our ministry is geared towards the people already sitting in the pews. And we've slipped into this come and see me model of church. Hey, you need to come to church and see what we do. Hey, you need to come to church and be a part of our service. Hey, you need to come to church and check out our worship team. They're really good. Hey, you need to come to church and be a part of a small group. Hey, you need to come to church. Hey, you need to come. Hey, you need to come. And yes, we 100% should be inviting people. We should be drawing people in. Yes. But if all of our ministry is based around the decision for somebody to come into our world, then our maintenance mentality is not going to make a difference. We have to get in the mindset of we are ambassadors into the world. Just like Jesus said, go and make disciples. Go make disciples and go Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and all the other parts of the earth. And Paul is a great example. He did exactly that. He went everywhere and he made a difference. He went everywhere and touched lives. He walked into all kinds of different cultures and all kinds of different people groups. And he tried to figure out what he had to do to reach them where they were. And too often, we just say, hey, come into our world. Let me invite you into our Christian world, into our church. And once you come into our world, then you'll get all the benefits of being a part of a relationship with Jesus. And I know we don't necessarily say that, but that's essentially the message that we're sending. And so the reason that I'm talking about this today is because, again, one of the things that we're trying to do here at Ministry Hackers, one of the focus that we have is that we want you as the pastor, as the lead pastor, as a ministry leader, we want you to live your dream life in ministry. Now, if I am honest, there are two ways to do that. Number one, if you're okay with a maintenance phase church where you just create the systems and they kind of run automatically, and you create a pastoral staff that just kind of operates on go, and there's not really anything innovative or new or changing or whatever, you're just kind of coasting, that could create the atmosphere, or that could create the situation where you're able to spend more time with your family. You're able to go on vacations and have your hobbies. That may create that for you because you're on a maintenance phase. And so when you're maintaining, there's really not a lot of work that comes with that. You just have to make sure that all the systems are working and that everything is flowing the way it's supposed to. But my question is that really why you went into ministry? Is that really what you were called to do? Or did you go into ministry to see God do great things, to move in mighty ways, to change lives and to impact communities and to just blow things up for the kingdom of Jesus? Is that why you went into ministry? Because my guess is if I were to sit down with each one of you and have this conversation, every one of you would have a moment in your early years when you were called into ministry where you imagined this great life in ministry where God moved and lives were changed and things were happening, and you spent time with your family and you had this wonderful, happy life that you were proud of and that made a difference and impacted others, and you could pass on to your kids and tell stories about and all of those things. I think most of us are not going to live that dream life in ministry if we're living in a maintenance phase. Because deep down at our core, we know that if a church is in a maintenance phase, it's not doing everything it can to reach people for the kingdom of God. And I believe at the core of who I am that most of us are not called into ministry to settle for status quo. We're not called into ministry to settle for ho-hum, let's just get through the week and make it to another Sunday. But according to this research, 83% of us are in that phase. And that's if we're lucky. If we're lucky to be in the 62% of maintenance, because if we're in the 7% of preservation or the 14% in life support, I don't think you are living your dream life in ministry. And so my encouragement to you, my challenge to you today is to ask yourself the question, are we just maintaining what we're doing? And am I happy with that? And if the answer is yes, we are maintaining, and no, I'm not happy, then it's time for you to start innovating. It's time for you to start figuring out what you need to do differently. It's time for you to think outside of the box, to get outside of your ministry practice traditions that you've learned and that you've done for years and years and years. You need to start asking the question, what ministries are working and which ones are not? And if they're not working, then why do we keep them around? And let's focus on the things that are working, that are engaging people outside of the church. And whether they're bringing them in or not, the point is Jesus being modeled and is his gospel being shared? Because if that's the case, people will find their way to the church. They will find their way into our services. They will find their way into our discipleship experience, which is why I'm so big on creating an engaging discipleship experience. Because the worst thing is to have somebody come into your church excited to be a part of a church community, to be a part of a faith community, to come in seeking Jesus, seeking an encounter, seeking, some sort of renewed life and relationship with him. And they come in and they have the great experience in service, great, sermon moment, and they hear the altar call and they respond to Jesus. And then it's like, okay, now you're saved. And now it's time to go into discipleship. And the discipleship experience is either just super shallow and not very helpful, or it's really not that interesting and not engaging. And people come once, maybe twice, and then they just they're done because it's not worth their time. So that's why I push this discipleship experience, creating an engaging discipleship experience, because it is the core, it is the foundational moment of a believer's life outside of salvation. But quite honestly, I will say, if you have a great discipleship experience, the salvation can happen in the middle of it. We've had a lot of salvations with not great discipleship, and we lose people along the way. But if we have great discipleship experiences that are pointing to Jesus and creating this deeper relationship with him, the salvation experience will happen along the way. And it will increase the number of people that stay engaged, that stay apart, that help us to rise up into a sustained health point on the growth curve or on the life cycle. And I just think that's where we are. As ministry hackers especially, our mindset and our attitude is we want to live our lives, the dream life in ministry that we've always imagined. And we want to do that by making Jesus famous and sharing his gospel and changing people's lives. And so when I see this, 62% are in maintenance, 83% are in the downward cycle, that's alarming and it's concerning. It's concerning from a national perspective. It's concerning from a kingdom of God perspective. But it's concerning from a pastor's well-being perspective. When I think about you and I think about your heart and your mind and your spirit and where you are and your fulfillment and your level of stress and your level of anxiety, when I think of all those things for you, and I think if you're in that 83 percentile, well, no wonder you're stressed. No wonder you're anxious. No wonder you're overwhelmed. No wonder you have a task list a mile long, because you're just maintaining or you're fighting for your life to create something that somehow breathes life into this church. And I don't want that for you. I want you to pastor a church that's in a sustained health or really strategic growth or even momentum growth, like anywhere on the other side of the life cycle. And every church can be reinvented. Every church can go from the right side of the life cycle all the way to the left in just a matter of time. In a few weeks, in a few months, that can happen. And so I just want to encourage you and challenge you. Ask yourself the question, is the church that I'm pastoring right now, are we in a maintenance phase, and am I okay with that? And if the answer is no, I'm not okay with that, then it's time to start figuring out what you need to change, how you need to innovate, and what you need to do differently to move your church from the right side of the life cycle back to the left and create new energy and new life and new growth and new hope for your community and for your church body. Okay? So I hope you take me up on that. I hope you dive into it. If you want to check out the Tony Morgan's book, you can find it on Amazon. It's a great book that will kind of walk you through the life cycles and explain them a little bit deeper, and even give you some insight into how to determine whether or not you are in which phase on the life cycle. So I encourage you to go to Amazon, search Tony Morgan, you'll find the book. But my hope always for all of us here at Ministry Hack is that we're pastoring growing churches and we're living the dream life of ministry that we've always wanted. And so whatever we can do to get you there is what we want to do. That's the goal here. And so ask those questions and be honest and be open and really dive in and dig deep on what you need to do to get to that left side of the life cycle so that you are growing again, growing in new numbers, growing in discipleship, growing in faith, growing financially, growing in challenges, just growing. All right. Let me remind you once again, we have that framework. We have the one pager, creating an engaging discipleship experience. Again, you want to create an atmosphere where people who get saved have encounters with Jesus. You want to have something for them to go into immediately that's engaging, that's exciting, that's challenging, and that takes them deeper into their relationship with God. And if you have that, then not only are you advancing the kingdom of God, but you are creating an atmosphere where people come, they grow in a relationship with Jesus, and they stay a part of your church, they grow in their faith, and they start investing back into what you're doing there at your church and in the community you're in. So go to ministryhackers.com/discipleship. Go to that page, put in your name, put in your email. We'll send you everything you need. The one pager, you can start working on it right now. You do it right now. You can be starting in 5 minutes, developing and designing your engaging discipleship experience. It's all free. So just check it out. If you look at it and you say, hey, this isn't really going to help me out at all, that's fine. You haven't lost anything. But if you jump in there and you start looking at it, you start looking at the question, you start walking through it, I think you're going to find that it's going to help you create an engaging discipleship experience that is going to change the way you do ministry and engage people that come into your church and want to go deeper with Jesus in a way they never have before. So ministryhackers.com/discipleship. Get it and start working on it today, and you won't regret it. All right. Hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and I'll see you in the next episode.